Hello, speech class. We are moving on to your fourth and final speech of the semester. And I know that, we're not doing what we had wished we would do at the start of the semester, but I think we're going to make some alterations to the plan that will make this exciting. I've already told you I've switched the fourth speech from a group speech to a demonstration speech. Um, and I'm excited for this because I think demonstration speeches are a lot of fun. And the fact that you're going to be doing it at home, online, is actually, and pre-recorded, actually really benefits this speech in a lot of ways. So I hope we just have fun with this speech and can use all of the things that we've talked about this semester up till this point. So that's where we're at. We're starting with a demonstration speech. So first of all, I want you to consider where you see demonstrations happening in your life. Maybe you see a demonstration of a craft, and it is April 10th, 2020, and it is snowing furiously outside my window. This is a crazy, crazy year. Sorry, I just had to make that little side note. Even my cat is staring out of the window in wonder at what on earth is going on. Let me take a picture and I'll send it to you guys. There it is. Okay. Um, Anyhow, so maybe you're going to a museum and you see demonstrations of an art form that isn't done so much anymore. So we have, for example, a woman weaving, and there's a demonstration. We have a demonstration at some sort of flea market. A man is demonstrating different types of mops with the ideal of selling them. Similarly, we have in the third picture a woman who is selling some sort of beauty care, skincare product, and it looks like she is ready to demonstrate that product to customers in the store. And then finally, we have a woman demonstrating and offering samples of a different, looks like some sort of smoothie that she's making at a farmer's market. So these are just some ways that you see demonstration, but you see it so many other times. You see it on television. I had on the first screen, I had a TV personality from QVC. Um, you see it even in classes when a teacher is trying to show you how to do something. Maybe they're trying to show you how to set up your Word document for MLA format or something like that, but they're demonstrating these things for you. So when you're thinking about demonstration, I want you to think about it very similar to a process analysis essay, if that rings any bells from when you took Comp 1 or English 1 or whatever they call it here at Montclair. Um, in this sort of scenario, when you're writing the essay, you have uh, two different purposes. You are explaining a process or analyzing a process. Yes, that's true no matter what you're doing, but you're either giving an explanatory or directional process analysis. Explanatory is explaining the steps of a process. The idea here is that your audience either can't or won't have be able to complete this, either because they don't have the resources, or it's not tailored to them, or it's simply not something a single person does. For example, photosynthesis, we can explain the process of it, but people aren't going to actually do that. Performing a lung transplant. Maybe if you are talking to a bunch of med school students, that may be more directional than it is explanatory, but for the general audience, it's going to be explanatory. You're not expecting people to do lung transplants. Or maybe you're describing how a bill passes through Congress. This is not something that they are necessarily going to do, again, unless you're talking to a bunch of students of congressional law or something like that. So these are explanatory are steps that your audience is not going to do. On the other hand, directional process analysis is when you are giving directions or instructions, and your expectation is that the audience is either going to complete it with you or they are going to complete it at some point in the future. The point is that they are able to complete it. So some examples might be changing a tire or baking a souffle or giving yourself a haircut. So there's lots of different options. As you may guess, this speech is going to be a directional process analysis. So your speech has to include every step necessary for the audience to complete this project successfully. You should use props. You must use props. You do not need PowerPoint or any other kinds of visual aids, but props are necessary. I'm not going to give you a maximum or a minimum. You'll know what's the right amount. The next thing is you are going to include a demonstration of each step, and I have in parentheses each important step. You know, if you are showing how to bake a cake and you put the cake in the oven for 45 minutes, you do not need to show yourself waiting for 45 minutes. I mean, that's technically a step. Waiting is a step that takes 45 minutes or whatever, but you don't need to show that step, obviously. You know, that's the nice thing about doing this on video, is that you can edit and jump ahead or just film the important bits. You should include a demonstration. I just said that. You should be organized to maximize audience understanding. So it can be a little bit overwhelming watching a demonstration that is unorganized, where you are simply just spewing out one instruction after another. So it's important to organize them, and we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Oh, not the next, in a couple upcoming slides. So first of all, what you need to do is select a topic that's appropriate for your audience, and to understand, obviously, your audience in selecting your topic. So just as before, this is an informative speech. So everything we did back when we talked about the informative speech still applies here. So it may be valuable at this point to go back and pull out your notes from that speech earlier in the semester. So 3 things that you had to do when you were picking your informative speech topic was to keep it new, interesting, and relevant. So the new, we want to make sure that the majority of your audience has not seen this topic or your method before, that it's not something that they're completely used to. We had given the example weeks and weeks ago about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's not really new to most people, so that wouldn't be an appropriate topic. We want to pick something that's interesting, that captures their attention, and is something they're curious about. And then finally, something that is relevant in their own lives. Does this have something that's useful in their lives? Now, I often get people asking questions like, well, I'd like to do a makeup tutorial, but only half of the class are women. And therefore, you know, it's not relevant. I disagree with that, because I think that a demonstration of something that statistically may not appeal to a portion of your audience can still be appreciated. And who's to say, you know, maybe the guys aren't going to say, hey, that's interesting, I want to learn more about that. Or maybe they get a new appreciation for what their sister goes through when they're trying to get dressed up for going out. So don't necessarily sell yourself short because a portion of your audience, you don't on the surface think that it is relevant to them. You can make it relevant. Just like when we did the persuasive speech, I said that it's your job to make sure your audience understands why it's relevant. Maybe it's not something that applies to them right now, but it will in the future, or they just don't realize how it applies to them. So again, think outside the box a little bit. don't let this um, stop you from choosing a topic necessarily. All right, so we need to think about your speech type and purpose. As I said already, this is an informative speech. By the way, I wanted to make just a little side note. If you're following along, yes, I realize that some of these PowerPoints don't actually fit that rule that we talked about, like the 6x6 rule and the font size. When you are doing digital presentations rather than live presentations, some of those rules are a little bit different. So that's why you may not see me following these rules specifically. All right, back to the slide here. We are thinking about your purpose statement. It's very much like your thesis statement, but what you really want to make sure that you're doing is showing what skill you want your audience to walk away with. What is it that you want them to be able to do when they finish watching your presentation? If you had to boil it down to one specific thing, what would that one thing be? And then next up, why is it important to do it your way? Why should they watch your video about changing a tire rather than the 800 other videos out there on changing a tire? So why is your way important? So for example, you might say something like, after listening to my speech, I hope you will be able to start a campfire quickly and effectively. So again, that sets what your expectation is for this speech, but it also sets it aside that not only are you going to be teaching them how to start a campfire, but you're going to teach them an effective and quick way to start a campfire. All right, so next up, we need to talk about how you organize your speech. Now, I will be giving you an outline template as before. It's going to look more like your informative speech outline, but you're going to, again, need to think about organization. So first of all, a lot of the other things we've talked about still apply, like attention getters. But I want to take this time to encourage you to think a little bit outside the box, change it up a little bit. Bring some of your own personality to the speech. In other words, we really need to hear you ask a question to get the audience's attention again. You know that is something that is kind of an easy go-to. Well, let's take some time to think of a more creative way to get your audience's attention. You might have an anecdote is a great way with a demonstration speech. It's been a long day. So for example, I mean, you can't look up a recipe online anymore these days, even just written ones, without having to read through 5 pages of how this recipe came down from Aunt Doris through the whole line all the way to this person who's writing the blog post and how she makes it for her family every Sunday morning. And so maybe that's a little bit excessive, but that the goal when we're reading blog posts about recipes is that they are trying to get you to feel something for the recipe rather than just dumping the ingredients and the to-do list on you. Yes, you can do that, but that's not really a speech. That's just a tutorial manual guidebook. You do need to add some of your own personality to this. And then the other way to help your audience connect with your speech is to cluster the steps. You are looking at 3 to 4 clusters throughout the speech. So I've given you an example here and I'm going to walk you through it. So let's pretend like we are doing a speech about baking angel food cake. So I'm going to start by, as I'm planning my speech, I'm going to start by just brainstorming the steps of the speech. And I might start with, step number 1, 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, separate the egg whites, going on and on and on. So I might just start by listing those things. And I get further down my little brainstorm list of things that need to be done. And I get to baking the cake in a preheated oven, and it's done when the toothpick inserted into the cake comes out clean, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I go further and further. I'm continuing on in my list. And I, explain that while the cake cools, maybe you're going to cut some strawberries for topping the cake. You're going to macerate them in sugar. You're going to whip up some heavy cream for decorating the cake. And so you're going to list out all of these steps in the cake, in making the cake. But the job here and what makes it easier for your audience to understand is to separate these things into clusters. So it might look something like this. Cluster 1 or chapter 1 or act 1, if you want to think of it that way, is to use fresh ingredients. So all of getting your ingredients together, getting them started, that all goes in that first act or main point if we're thinking of it like a traditional speech outline. And then maybe cluster 2 or chapter 2 is baking the cake to perfection. And that's where all of the cooking portion of it comes in. And then finally, the last chunk is, or cluster, is to talk about adding the final touches. And that's where you're putting all the toppings and getting all that ready. So I haven't given you every step of the process, but I've kind of given you a look at how you might break down the entire process of baking an angel food cake into clusters that are easier for your audience to follow. So some other notes and requirements about this assignment will be, I'm giving you 5 to 9 minutes. I know that that is a big span of time, but that's because demonstration can take a little bit longer. It can be a little bit more time intensive because you might not be speaking every single second, but you have to show the audience some things. So I'm giving you a little bit more leeway here. Next up, as I said before, props are required, but PowerPoints or other visual aids are not required. You can use them if you feel like it, but you don't have to. Note cards at this point are optional. Obviously, I didn't collect digitally note cards for your previous speech, but they are, for this speech, optional. Go ahead and use them if you like, or don't use them if you feel like you can get your thoughts out there in an organized way. So I'm still going to ask you to do some research and include at least one oral citation. The way you might include this is either in an attention getter, you might give a little interesting bit of trivia, or you might use something called dead time talk. Dead time talk is maybe it's very useful in a demonstration where you might be doing a certain step that doesn't require explanation all the way through. For example, if you're making a cake and you have to beat the eggs for a minute. So while you're beating the eggs for a minute, you can talk about, maybe some research. If you're, when did you know that the angel food cake was developed in the year 1772? Or I have no idea. I'm making stuff up now. Don't quote me on that. So you can bring up little bits of trivia while you are doing certain parts of the task. So that's called dead time talk. So one good way to add research in to your speech is by putting it into dead time talk. This is a big one. So yes, this is an unconventional assignment, but the entire semester is unconventional. Therefore, if you would like to maximize your production value for your speech and really make it more like a YouTube tutorial than a speech, a public speaking class speech, I'm okay with that. I think that, I don't need to explain the whole look of a YouTube tutorial. You guys are of the generation that you want to learn how to do something, you go to YouTube and you watch a tutorial. So if you feel like you can really connect with that and you feel comfortable with editing your video in very minor ways that will help you up that production value, I'm okay with that. However, I realize that that might require some level of technological capability that you may not feel comfortable with. So, if you don't want to do that and you just want to give a regular plain old speech in front of a camera, uh, you know, single shot while you demonstrate your thing, one take, one cut, one edit, that's fine with me. Do it just like you did your persuasive speech. I'm okay with either way. I do, however, no matter what it is, I do need to hear you and see you because I am grading you using the same rubric I have all along. So I do still need to see your delivery style regardless of which way you choose. Your speech still has to be extemporaneous, so no reading scripts. And make sure you practice. This is even more important because you're going to be doing something else while you're talking to the audience. So it's important. And then upload your video to YouTube when you're finished. You're still going to be doing an outline and bibliography and uploading those to Canvas, but you get the idea there. Okay, so some other just warnings and advice that I want to hit you with as you work on this speech. So first of all, make sure that you can complete that within the confines of the space that you're allowed. This is obviously something that is more relevant actually if you have to do this speech in person in a class. You're now at your home, so let me give you an example. If you want to do a speech on changing your tire, you can. In previous semesters, when I've had this as an online, not an online, but an in-person assignment, that was not an option. We couldn't follow a speaker out to the parking lot to watch them change a tire on their car. And still fit within some reasonable amount of time. So, but just be aware of your surroundings. Likewise, we couldn't watch somebody do, cook a full meal in a classroom, but you now are filming inside your house. So maybe you can use those options. So take advantage of those opportunities. Do, however, make sure you remember any laws, rules, and regulations regarding your props, your ingredients, and your method. For example, this would not be a good time to talk about how to go and demonstrating different types of handshakes with your neighbor. This is not a good time for that. That would break a rule about social distancing. You do have ethical responsibility to be a good example to your audience, whoever they may be. Remember availability of materials and appliances. Again, if you're in a classroom trying to bake a cake, there's no oven there. You're at your house, so make use of those opportunities. If there is a limitation, can you come up with a creative solution and still make the process complete and understandable? So again, if you were in a classroom and you were trying to show people how to bake a cake, yeah, there are shortcuts around that. You can do the whole cake baking process up to the point where you put it in the oven, but then you can have a cake already cooked and pretend like you've just taken it out of the oven. I mean, they do that on the television all the time. So that's what we're talking about. Another question to ask yourself is, do you need a model or a guinea pig? Do you need somebody to, for example, if you're going to talk about how to cut your hair or cut a friend's hair, do you need a model to do that? Maybe you might even want to have a guinea pig, for example. You want to teach someone how to make origami. And so instead of just talking to the camera, you can actually have a sibling, or maybe you have a little child and you want to teach that child at your home how to do origami. So your video is not only you explaining to us, the audience, how to make origami, but you're also teaching your little friend here that's live on camera with you. If you are using a model or a guinea pig, ask yourself, how prepared do they need to be? Give them preparations. If it's somebody that you have living at your house, what do they need to know ahead of time? And do they need to prepare anything? And always make sure that you take care of your model or your guinea pig. It's important to refer to them by name, call on them by name, thank them by name. This is important too, and especially in a live setting where you might ask for a volunteer from the audience. You don't have a pre-planned guinea pig. Make sure that they are assured they are genuinely safe emotionally, physically, that you're not going to, invite them up and say, okay, I'm going to cut your hair, and you pull out the, buzz clippers, and that's not what they thought they were in for. Um, and also take care of them in the sense that they always know what to do, that they always know where they're standing, what they're doing, and when you're done with them, so when they can go and sit back down, or you don't need them anymore. So make sure they always know what you're doing with that. I should mention here that if you are going to use, because I've made the example of using like a sibling or something, if it is a minor, someone under, I think, 18, according to YouTube regulations, you do have to have parental permission to have them videotaped and posted. So do be aware that that is another little level that you just have to take care of. I don't imagine you're going to be, that you're, in quarantine with random strangers. Who knows? Maybe you are. If you want the audience to follow along as you are doing this project, what materials do they need to have? And tell them at the start. Let them even, you might even say something like, you could put your press the pause button until you get these items. So if you can pretend that the audience is going to follow along with you as they're watching your video, because I'm sure you've done some projects while watching somebody on YouTube. So that's all I have to say for you for this project right now. I hope you are very excited about the opportunities that this demonstration speech poses. I'm really excited to see what you all come up with, and I'm excited to learn from you. So good luck. Talk to me if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.